have to reply the answer of the questions.
Yeah, that's fine then.
Yeah.
That's fine then. So my basic concern is, since it's I'll try to manage all those terminology, but sometimes people has weird question, I don't know, and
Yeah,
I'm not very good at knowing every question in advance. So at that point
yeah,
it would be great, right?
fine, sir,
Okay.
fine.
Good morning, sir. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. Sorry
Uh,
for little
Good
delay.
morning, Dr. Vyas.
Good morning, Dr. Vatsa. Good morning.
Dr. Vyas is our Dean, School of Engineering. And here, Dr. Abimanyu, though it is 10:30 over there, but still he seems to be very spirited and ready for us. Thank you so much, sir. Good
Thank
morning,
you.
everyone, and good evening to sir. It's better to say namaste, which has got global acceptance as a greetings. So, namaskar. Welcome everyone to this fifth uh, webinar in the series of advanced and recent technologies in the field of computer science and engineering towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. And today, the topic of our speaker, Dr. Abimanyu Vats, is very, very interesting and very, very significant. That is role of data science for food security. It's an interdisciplinary project, what he has said. So it's a topic, wherein he will be dealing with various aspects, how the data science can be applied in agriculture, in food security, and the others in horticulture as well. Now, without much delay, I invite our Dean, Dr. A.P. Vyas, to set the objective of this webinar.
Thank you, Namrata ma'am, and a very good morning to one and all, and very good evening, Dr. Vatsa.
Good evening.
Yeah. See, the series was started with an aim and to create awareness regarding the Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is a mission and vision of our beloved Prime Minister Narendra Modi, sir. In continuation of the same, it was thought by Sumit Chaudhary and myself and our team that why don't we create awareness that how computer engineers, how IT engineers can help in creating this Atmanirbhar Bharat, and how we can make, create a spark among the young bodies in young minds. And as a part of this five webinar series was organized. And today, I think it is the last webinar in that series. Am I right, Sumit?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Yeah. And this is not last but the least, I would like to say, because we will continue with the other branch also towards the same thing post COVID-19, because post COVID Atmanirbhar is the most important criteria in development of country. And today you are going to touch a very important topic under this era, because we have seen the era pre-COVID-19, during COVID-19, and post-COVID-19, and we have experienced that. Under that condition, the food security is prime importance. Each and everyone has a right to have food on this earth, and we can't, grab it from them. It is their right. So, if I say then food waste estimate, even food waste index report 2021 says that estimated 931 million tons of the food was wasted globally in 2019. And out of this estimated food waste, the highest is from the China, that is 64 kg per capita per year. And then second number, unfortunately, India, 50 kg per capita per year. So, it is a very unfortunate part that we are wasting so many food. And in terms of the million, if a million ton, if I say, then it is 68.7 million ton we are wasting food in India, which can be used to starve number of people, huge amount of people. And in that connection, how this data science can help in solving this issue, rather in solving, I would say, in managing this issue. Because with the data science, we can manage for the supply chain of such food waste, and that can be utilized in a better way. So I wish that our young people will definitely get out the best out of it. They will absorb the thing, they will understand the severity of this issue, and they will act accordingly as a responsible citizen of this great nation. So thank you very much for choosing such topic, Dr. Vatsa. And now, uh, again, good morning to all and welcome one and all. Dr. Namrata, now it is yours.
Thank you so much, sir, for setting the context of this webinar. Fantastically, connecting how data science can be helpful in food security. Now I invite Dr. Sumit to introduce as a courtesy about Dr. Abhimanyu Vatsu for the audience.
Good morning, one and all, and I welcome you here in this last session of webinar, international webinar event on advanced and recent technologies in the field of computer science and engineering towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. And I'm very thankful to my guru, Professor Dr. Abhimanyu Vatsa, for accepting a request, for delivering expert lecture on role of data science for food security. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Vatsa. Dr. Vatsa is working as an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science, Fairleigh Dickinson University, Teaneck, New Jersey, USA. He also worked as an assistant professor at West Texas A&M University, Kenyon, Texas, USA, teaching and research assistant at University of Missouri, Columbia, USA, and an assistant professor for more than 10 years in engineering colleges and university in India also. He was secretary 2019-20 and is treasurer and webmaster 2021-22 of IEEE North Jersey section, New Jersey, USA. Dr. Vatsa received minor in statistics, MS, and PhD in computer science from University of Missouri, Columbia, USA. He teaches courses of data science like deep learning, big data analytics, data mining, database systems, and cyber sciences, includes blockchain technology, cryptocurrency, applied cryptography, and firewall configuration and IDS. Sir, area of research includes application of data science, cyber science, application of blockchain technology, computational biology, and bioinformatics. The working projects are in the area of MIS, phenotype, melanoma, skin cancer, roosting behavior of birds, the chimney swift, characterization of malware in intrusion detection system IDS. So once again, I welcome you, sir. And I'm telling you all the participants, it's for sure you will enjoy this session. Kindly be here. And now you can start the session, sir, please. Thank you.
It's very impressive, sir. Very impressive portfolio you handle, sir, and very impressive credentials, sir. The spotlight is on you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Bajaj, Dr. Vyas, and Dr. Sumit, and Dr. Neha. Thank you very much for these opportunities. And probably audience will enjoy it. And my humble request to all audience, whenever you feel something unknown, it means, it's interdisciplinary and experiment-based research. So here you will get mixture of different discipline. Though I am from the computer science, I do love computer science terminology, but I'll have to adopt computational biology because that's my area of research. So still I am learning those genetics, those phenotypes, but probably you have any questions behind it, just type in the chat, and definitely I'm going to address that. And I'll try my best to introduce all those terminology while I'm going to talk. And so let's start with the discussion. First of all, role of data science for the food security. What does it mean for it? And Dr. Vyas explained so nicely about the food security issue, that is the wastage of food. That's right. And that's related to the management, that's related to the many other issues. But we are scientists. we must have to solve this problem in a different aspects. It means we are less manager and more innovative stuff. So how we are going to cope up with the stuff? So why not we are going to increase the food productivity? That is the one solution. I know we can't change people, we can't control everything, and we can punish them, but we do have one capacity, something we could increase the yield of the food product. So that's I'm going to talk about in this research, how you are going to increase the food product such that everybody should get food, sufficient food, I would say. So before going to that, I'm going to introduce myself with the DChain Lab. These are the research projects that we are working on. And today, once you are going to see the highlighted one, low dimensional data, non-parametric analysis, and maize phenotype. So data I'll take through the maize phenotype, and that analysis would be the non-parametric analysis, and it's low dimensional data. Other research related to the same same plant, that is the maize plant that we considered. I'll let you know why we considered the maize plant. But another research related to this one, that's high dimensional data. And I'll give you a little bit flavor of that one. I'm not going to cover whole thing because I have limited time, only 1 hour. So I'm going to cover the details about the low dimensional data only, and related to the maize phenotype. I also do research related to the blockchain technology. In fact, a few papers are under the review. And one that is the electronic voting system, and another one is the healthcare system project deployment in the blockchain technology is under our own research lab, and few students are working on it, including me. And this maize phenotype, this is the one phenotype. There is a skin phenotype. That's also, and that's a skin phenotype. It is known as the melanoma cancer. This is the 5th stage of skin cancer. In 2020, it has been recommended by WHO. There would be about 100,000 of the patient only in United States of America of skin cancer. So their detection and prevention is very, very important issues. We are demanding issues for the radiologist and the dermatologist. So we do have those images, skin cancer images of all 5 stages, and my algorithms and all these things, they are going to detect. And so far, my lab, they have found something, and that's very impressive. We got the good result on this one. Another project that we are working on, the ecology, and in this ecology project, we will have to think about our ecological system. So in this ecological system, we considered the word we have here, and why we do consider. So do you know, in ecological system, everything should be balanced. And if we are missing something, definitely something would be unusual. So this ecology says from 1966 to 2021, there is 72% of drop in the population of the bird, a particular kind of the bird, that is the migrant bird. And I'm going to talk in reference to the New Jersey area, because in New Jersey area, about migrant bird start migrating from mid-April to, and they stay up to October, mid-October. So at that point, they found many chimney. It means where swift ship chimney. It means where these migrant would stay. About 75% of the roosting sites were empty. So this drastic change in their population and decrease in the population, it is a bad alarm for our ecological system. So that's we are doing this research. We have submitted this proposal, and one proposal has been approved, and probably it will be approved with a good amount, and another would be the NSF one. That is the huge one. So that is the ecology related project. So though it looks like a very diverse, as Dr. Bajaj said, but for me, it looks like the tools that we are going to use, that is in a different flavor. Only that particular scenarios we'll have to understand, we'll have to get through those different domain. That's the big task, I understand. But yeah, it's not a very, I'm not doing very good, like the very big job. It's a normal job. Every scientist do that, right? So this is the project, and these are the past research that I did, and that was related to the network and network security kind of the stuff. And still, still continue intrusion detection system. Otherwise, I'm not in touch with this one. If somebody want to continue, definitely I love to continue with you. But current research is also good. These are the teaching interest, and though Dr. Sumit introduced very well, even I can't introduce in that way myself. So he's nice guy. He introduced in a wonderful way, and the evolving and emerging technology, blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, applied cryptography. That's my old baby from last 20 years, I think. And this is the information security. There I apply this blockchain technology in order to make information secure, and I would say that is the blockchain oriented software. That is the right terminology that I could use in information security. And big data analytics, that's all my research is. And even I'm going to talk not in detail, but I'll introduce tiny whiny. And this deep learning, that is the one of the my favorite thing. Today I'm not going to talk about these topics, but other research they are going to apply, like the melanoma cancer, totally dependent on the deep learning process and the big data analytics one. And database system, as my background is in the computer science, so it's my origin. So come to the research problem. It would be the data science and the phonetics. Might be you haven't heard about the phonetics. So it's a genetics baby. Genetics baby, it means you could say, just I would like to introduce the phonetics. What is this phonetics? So like you are able to see me. My color is black. I'm ugly. That is my phenotype, right? So once you said my color is black, it means you could measure it, you could observe it, you could feel it. That is the phenotype. And these, my black color is responsible due to some group of genes available in me. It means my parents has, by the combination of those parents' genes, I got myself, and thereafter those particular group of genes are responsible for my color. So ultimately you could say genomic sequences or the genes are directly related with the phonetics. Phenotype, you call it the phenotype. So phenotype is nothing but observable and measurable entity. Whatever things you could observe and measure, that would be the phenotype. So that is the, and it's a very big science. So, a genetics guy, always they are creative, equally creative as computer scientists are. So they call it the phonetics. It's similar to the genetics, but it's a different thing. So that we are going to talk about. Let me introduce the problems. Dr. Vyas introduced this problem very nice way. He just made the whole problems very simple. So it has been observed by 2050, there would be the scarcity of the food product. And it has been observed because the population growth is outpacing the agriculture productivity. Whenever like the farmers or agronomists or geneticists or the phonetics guy, they are working on it and they observe this problem, they solve. And this is the chart that I'm showing. It is the chart, it is the average value, mean value, right? But different country and different continent, they have the different percentage. So I took just a mean value. And what it is, so you are able to see one green plot, one is the brown plot. Brown plot, if I'm not making mistakes, I think this is a brown color. Yeah. So this brown color, that is the current rate of total food productivity, that is TFP. This is the total food productivity rate, and it is 1.69%. Where you said required rate of total food productivity growth should be 1.75 as our population is growing. This is the big issue. So there is a difference of 0.07%. And it will give you, in terms of the number, about few millions of the people will be hungry or they will starve due to the food product, lack of the food product. In this calculation, they have not considered wastage of food. While Dr. Vyas was addressing, he considered just only wastage of food. Here we are not considering the wastage of food. This has been considered if whatever the food we are producing, and all foods will be consumed without any wastage. At that point, million of the peoples will be hungry. I believe everybody needs food. It's moral right, right? I don't know about others, but I do need food in order to survive myself, right? So that is the problem. Then this problem has been there are many geneticists who was working on it, and I'll let you know their approach, what was their approach and what they were doing. But these problems came into mind to the geneticist and computer scientist, agronomist. They sat together and they thought about it. There is a one solution. One solution, why not we are going to increase the food productivity, yield of the product. So any of the food plant like the rice or maize or whatever it is, so you could increase their productivity, and that is known as yield. So yield is itself a phenotype. Yield of the food product itself is a phenotype. This is the one solution. And in that way, geneticists, agronomists, farmers, and computer scientists, they sat together and they thought about it, how we could do that. So this is the problem. I think I have introduced the problem, and everybody understand there is only one problem, that is how we are going to increase the food productivity from the plant, right? And this is the 2050 forecast. So let's start with this. Then we start thinking about it, and we thought how we are going to solve about it. And Dr. Casey Clapp and Dr. Ann's lab, they are working on it, and there are many scientists were geneticists. They are basically from the original background, and they were working on it. And thereafter, there were collaboration with the computer scientists, and they were doing them. And then thought, as we discussed, our phenotypes, like I said, in my case, my color is dark black. It means some group of genes is responsible for this black color. And if we would be able to find that group of genes, then I could tune my group of genes and I could become white. Am I right? Because that group of genes is responsible. So sometimes if group of genes is responsible for the fully white man, and somebody want to become black, just you need to tune their group of genes. So, but this saying in this way, it's very easy, but finding that group of genes is very difficult task. Why? Because genes are arranged in some different way, and our phenotypes are arranged in different way. So it is the one of the big problem, how we are going to find or how we are going to infer the network between group of similar phenotype and group of similar genes. Once you got the group of genes, group of phenotype, then you could mine it. So you could say there is a network mining problem, you could say, and that we call the infer the network between genotype and phenotype. You could say that's the approach. That's a written infer network among the phenotypes. That's the first problem. And why I say among the phenotype, because I say group of genes is responsible, a group of phenotype. It is not necessary. It is not necessary only group of genes is responsible for my color. It might be same group of genes is also responsible for my black hair. Same group of genes, not same group, it means the some partial one, subset of that group of genes who is responsible for my height, right? So this is a very complex process. And it is not only so. The gene also has environmental reaction. So if some person is living in hot country and some person is living in the cold country, or there different environmental condition, then gene expression will change. That is the environmental effect. And for example, once you are going to talk about, see this side, my skin is soft. On this side, it is black and hard. That is due to the environmental effect. My phenotype has changed on the both sides. So you could say the phenotype also very sensitive to the environment. First condition. Second condition, our genes reside, and genes itself has gene expression, and gene expression itself have interaction with the other genes, and so that is also has effect on the phenotype. The third thing, they have biochemical reactions. That's also a fact. But it is a very complex problem. It means how we are going to solve it. That is the big thing. So if we are going to try it on some human beings, that would be the very complex because their genomic sequences is huge. So we'll have to find the species where we'll have to try it, right? Where we will have to experiment it. And they are complex in nature. I told you why it is complex, because it depends on environmental condition. It also react with the environment. I showed you this example, this is skin example on both sides. And it also dependent on our gene to gene reactions, biochemical reactions, right? So it's a complex problem. So its phenotype itself is a very complex. And they are thinking they are interdependence. You can't say it is independent. Like I said, a group of genes is responsible for my black color. It is not true. Few genes among those group is also responsible for my black hair, also responsible for my the brown eye. It might be, I don't know, right? So that's the problem we were thinking about. And now you could ask me, hey professor, how it would be associated with your food security? Yes, a moment ago I told you a group yield, food productivity, it means the yield, that is the parameters usually agronomists and the farmers they are saying. Yield of the food is also a phenotype. So also a phenotype, yes, I'm right. And thereafter, once we'll come to know this yield is totally dependent on a group of genes. And if we would be able to find that group of genes and we could tune them and we could increase the food productivity. Once I said tune, it's easy, but it looks like easy, but it is not that this much easy. So let's go ahead and we are gonna talk more about it. So in this experiment, I'll come to the species. We, as being the computer domain, we found two kind of the problem. And why these two kind of the problem? Because we conducted two research. It totally research is the experimental based research. So please bear with me. Sometimes you will feel uncomfortable, but I'll try to give you that flavor. So I'll try to give you that feeling. That is the right terminology. So one is the greenhouse experiment and one is the field experiment. So in greenhouse experiment, we measured only few dimensions of the plant. That is, we considered the maize plant, and I'll let you know why we considered the maize plant and why not the other plant. Because maize is a corn, just corn. So it is a maize plant, and we measured their plant height, canopy spread. This is the plant height. Everybody understand? Canopy spread. It means that maize leaves are always spreaded like this. That is the canopy spread, and stem diameter, and the root weight that we measured. And we measured under certain circumstances, and thereafter we collected those phenotype data set. So those height, canopy, and stem, that is the phenotype because we measured it of the maize plant. So that data is the low dimensional data that we have, and the high dimensional data that is in the field experiment. In field experiment, we took photograph of the leaf and we took the photograph of the lesions. So on maize leaf might be observed there is a brown spot, and those brown spot is known as the lesions. And there is controversy among the macrobiologist and the geneticist. Geneticist is saying it is due to some genomic sequences, but macrobiologist is saying it is a disease. So they call it disease. They call it disease genomic. It is disease-based lesions. So that data we have collected through the high dimensional data, and what we did, we took the photographs of those lesions in situ. In situ, it means in the field. We created one platform, and that platform satisfy all the computer vision pre-requirement. And under the standard condition, we took photograph, and thereafter we convert those .NEF images from the raw images to TIFF images, that is the digital image. Thereafter, through the MATLAB image processing toolbox, we just segment them, quantitate them, and we found 34 dimensions of phenotype in that data set. And that's why it is the high dimensional data. So we do have two-dimensional data, two kind of the data. One is the low dimensional data, and it's the high dimensional data. And why I'm emphasizing, because both need different approach in order to get the actual outcome that we are expecting, right? So let's start with a little bit more about it. So this is the approach we found. And the approach was how we are going to infer the network between the genomic sequences or the symbolic genotype with the phenotype. And this is the process that we are looking for. This is the symbolic genotype, and this is the network that we are looking for, and this is the phenotype. So this way, this is looks very simpler. And it is, there are two ways. One way is you could go from genotype to the phenotype, direction is different, and that's known as the bottom up approach. And why I want to discuss here bottom up approach, because geneticists is doing out, they have applied this approach from the last more than 50 years. They were not able to achieve, and they were not able to find the appropriate number or group of genes for particular phenotype. And the reason behind it, this genomic sequences is huge. And there would be, once you will calculate the permutation and combination thing, there would be multiple, many huge combination. Even a computer would not be able to process. We have that kind of the big genomic sequences, and that much the combination. So it was very difficult. Thereafter, computer scientists came forward and they said top-down approach. They said we are not going to touch genotype at the first. We are going to touch the phenotype. It means like my color, my height, right? I'm fat, my fatness also. And they are going to work on the phenotype. And thereafter, they try to infer the network with the genomic sequences. And it looks better. Why? Because now you have the data set in terms of the phenotype. You could measure it, you could store it, and it doesn't matter how big is the data set. Our cloud is very good. So we will make a multiple nodes cloud and we could process it. That would be possible. And data collection is also very easy task because we have high definition cameras. Nowadays, drone is very beautiful and you could collect a ton of data very quick. So that's the reason it was appealing. And geneticists and the computer scientists came together and they're trying to work on this philosophy. And the motto was just how to increase food productivity, right? And the purpose is, once we are going to find the group of genes, those who are responsible for the food yield value, it means the food productivity value, then we could increase or decrease the food productivity by just tuning, right? This is the approach we got. And now thereafter we have a few questions how we could go from phenotype to the network. And at that point, there are many ideas and many algorithms, and different scientists has their different approach. Here, that's I'm gonna discuss about, that's our approach, what we are doing, what we have adopted, and why we have adopted. These are the questions we'll have to ask before proposing anything. So it has been observed, whenever you are talking about the phenotype, you have related characteristics. Like I say, you say my skin color is black, my hair is also black, my eye is also black. So my different organs are black, right? Similarly, in the plant, once you're talking about the height, once you're talking about the canopy spread, once you're talking about the stem diameter, might be different genomic sequences plant. And in that plant, we call it the embedded lines. Embedded lines mean genetic background. Genetic background means their mother and father. Their mother and father means, so a maize plant also has their hair that acts like the mother, and they have tassel. Tassel acts like the father. So they have pollen, and through the pollen, they got whatever the genetic mechanism is there. I'm not expert of the genetics, just I'm learning a little bit so that I could work on this project. So that embedded line will decide. So even though you will find there are different embroidered lines and their characteristics are different. It means their height is same, their stem diameter is same, their canopy is same, but their genetic background is different, right? And it also we observed in the human beings, right? So it is a complex process. Even though their genetic background is different and they might have related characteristics. So their determination, how you are gonna distinguish between them, that is the first question. Then come to the quantitate the characteristics of the phenotype. Once you are measuring height, once you are measuring canopy spread, once you are measuring a stem diameter or root weight, it's easy. But once I'm talking about the human beings, how you could determine I'm the more black and white, what would be the parameters, how you're going to measure it? That's more complex task. So similarly in the plant, we considered the maize plant, and there we try to manage it, but it is questionable. It means while somebody is going to do research, like many plant scientists do research on the soybean. At that point, I was just involved in the one of the photography for those plants, and they were asking how we are going to measure the their phenotype. So that's quantitative characteristics of the phenotype. That's also a big issue. Once you have image, it's very easy. Once you are measuring manually in the greenhouse, that's IDate or group date. So at that point, it's little bit different approach. So it depends on the problems. That's I want to say. Once you talk about the characteristics, then next question is how you are going to map those characteristics among the phenotype, because you are going to collect multiple phenotype, not only one, right? Like I said, plant height, canopy spread, stem diameter. These are the multiple phenotype. How you are going to find the relationship among them? And even though you found all these stuff, how you are going to determine which group of genes are similar, which group of phenotypes are similar? These are the questions that we had at the beginning. And thereafter, people thought about as most of the data scientists start thinking about it, they are going to say, hey, I'll go ahead and find the correlation. Sometimes you'll find two phenotype is 100% correlated, though their behavior is different. So that's the also question. So a statistical parameter sometimes is perfect for our experimental data and sometimes not. Why? Because this correlation is also dependent on the number of samples. There are two or three different types of correlation formulas, mathematical formulas, that is for the non-parametric data and parametric data. It means the data sample is large or small, or the sparse data set that you have. But concern is this would not be the solution. You can determine those regions, those nodes, just by the correlation. You can do that. Thereafter, they thought about the subpopulation. Why not you are going to take subpopulation of the data and you could determine some other way, find the subset of those data sets, subset of the dimensions. That is another approach. Thereafter, they were thinking about the just simulate. It means the best simulation process, you could simulate it and compare it. So you could say synthetic data with the real data set. That's also impossible task because there is numerous combination would be there. And then finally they say infer the network among these nodes. But once you are going to inform among these nodes, the big question is how you are going to find the nodes that we were talking about, the group of similar phenotype. That is the first task. You'll have to sort it out first. And thereafter we will jump over the inferring the network between the among those nodes. So that is the issue that we had. Thereafter, we just considered and we had again asked few questions. Really, these phenotypes are complex in nature? Are they totally interrelated, interdependent? Then we did some experiment. I haven't included those outcomes, but I love to explain it. We did a separate experiment and we proved it. Yes, they are interdependent and these phenotypes are complex. So there is another paper that we had, and there we proved it. Thereafter, finding the group of similar phenotype. That is finding the group of similar phenotype. It looks like the biological terminology, but once you are talking about the computer science, this is the cluster analysis process. So you will have to just find group of similar thing. It means the cluster things. So ultimately it is a clustering process. So I started with Network inference, it means the network mining. And before network mining, we will have to apply some clustering methods in order to find the nodes. But once I'll say cluster analysis to the geneticist, they might will not be feel comfortable, but they are very good and they are feeling comfortable with this terminology, finding group of similar phenotype. So ultimately for the computer scientist, it is the clustering problem. And thereafter, find the network region among the group of similar phenotype. So these are the three questions we asked. And here in this talk, we are going to talk about finding the group of similar phenotype. So we'll adopt some data set and I'll show you the intermediate difficulties and how we proceeded and how we achieved this clustering process. So I'll show you the all experiment. Though, by the way, this is our cornfield. And this cornfield is in Hawaii. Usually we plant 2 seasons of corn. One is in the summer, and summer we plant in the Missouri South Farm Research Farm. And in winter, we usually plant on the Hawaii. This is our corn plant and where we are planting. And you might recognize me. This is me. Okay. So this is the way we are doing experiment, and this is the corn. So if you have the farming background, you will enjoy more because you will see this kind of the research is going on. And my request to the next generation students, please, if you have any opinion, if you have any question, keep with me or write, just type on the chat. I love to talk with you because you are the key person for whole world, not only for India, right? So my request, if you could ask many questions, and might be in your question I'll get few answers, right? So these are the two experiment I would like to say. There are two experiment. One say I greenhouse. This is the greenhouse experiment. That is the Dr. Anne Stapleton lab and this Dr. Keswick lab. Both are the geneticists in origin, but she is a nice lady and she worked about the 20 years as a geneticist, 10 years as a biochemist, and thereafter from last 20 years she is working in as a computer scientist. So fully interdisciplinary. I can't explain more about her. It's a big profile. So these are the experiments that we have. Let's start with the greenhouse experiment. A species be considered maize. And now you could ask me why maize? Maize and rice, two plants are like that. Their genomic sequences are very small. That's the reason we considered maize. And their genomic sequences are separated, little bit separated. So it's very easy to analyze. It easy, and they have already found their genomic sequences. Even in our experiment, we collected the DNA samples of that. Once we'll have enough money from the NSF, hope so, very soon we will have it. And then we'll gonna extract their genomic sequences also. So still we have only genetic symbols. And thereafter we planted into the greenhouse experiment. And here it is the 90 embedded lines. 90 embedded lines means there is 90 different background of the image. Background, it means their mother and father has the different background. Here there is no mutant. Mutant, it means the characteristics. Like my sister genetic background is same, but their characteristics are different. She is beautiful and smart and tall. I'm just a small guy, black, ugly, and whatever you could say. So that's my embedded line. So there is mutant. That characteristics is not we have observed in this experiment. Though those mutants we have applied into the greenhouse experiment. So, and thereafter in greenhouse experiment, we measured height of the plant, canopy spread of the plant, and stem diameter of the plant. And you will say, hey, professor, why you wrote delta? Yes, there is a reason. Because we treated this plant with the nitrogen and water mixture. It looks like fancy, just urea and water mixtures. That is very simple. So that's nitrogen and water mixtures. And we treated those plants before, and we measured their height before treatment of nitrogen and water mixture. We measured their canopy spread and we measured their stem diameter and the root weight. I have not considered the root weight in my experiment because there was not making any sense to me in this experiment. That's why I have not included it. But might be in the another experiment it will make sense. We'll consider that one. But here we considered only height, canopy spread, and stem diameter. And we took this difference. It is before plant height, it means before treatment of nitrogen water means measured the plant height, and after plant height, it means after measuring their plant, nitrogen and water mixture. I'll talk a little bit in more how we determine different treatment one, because these treatment is directly analogous to their genetic background, and I'll give you the proof at the end of the session. I'll give you the proof how their different background of emerald lions react under the treatment under the different category. So that's the things we will talk in a more in detail whenever we'll jump over the down on the actual data. In fact, in the greenhouse experiment, we planted about 40 plant of each emerald lion, and since there are 90 emerald lions, so sorry, that is 3,600 plants, and we measured these parameters. And here we measured total 8 dimensions of the data. So those who are from the statistics, that is the variate. You could understand variate, that is fine for you. And this, their statistical nature, it is the non-parametric and sparse data. And why it is non-parametric and sparse, the reason behind it, once you will treat the plant with the nitrogen and water, few emerald lines, you will observe it, plant died, right? Plant died just after treating the nitrogen and water. Not all combination, few combination. And few nitrogen and water combination mixture on the same emerald line, they are giving the good growth in their height and canopy spread and stem diameter. So that's why once your plant died after treatment, so you have before plant height, but you don't have after plant height. Many cases it has also been found once you treat it with the nitrogen and water, plant shrunk, their height has decreased. So in that case, you have difference value, that is the negative. For geneticist, might be it is not the case, a very serious case, but for the data scientist, it is also a very big problem. You have mixture of data, and that data is positive value, negative value, null value, and zero value, right? So these are the data scientist problems that we are facing. Of course, these values also very useful for the geneticist, but we also have the very meaningful information in this data set. So that's the sparse one. And now you understand why our data is sparse and why our sample is very small, because plant died, plant shrunk, and we don't have after plant height, after canopy spread, and after stem diameter. So that makes the whole problem very complex. And how it would be the complex, I'll give you that flavor. This is the one experiment. And this is the experiment I'm going to talk, and this experiment's outcome I'm going to introduce in the whole discussion. But also I would like to take a few look on this field experiment one, because this is the big data analytics came forward, and it's a giant project also. We have images from last 14 years, so we are maintaining their pedigree. It means the same mother and father's pedigree, father, grandfather, grand-grandfather, grand-grand-grandfather. So we are maintaining about the 14 pedigree over here for the same emerald line. So this is, and every time what we did, we planting the maize into the cornfield. And for the next generation of students, while we plant this field, we are not dependent on any worker, because this is the culture of India. That's why I want to say, if you are a scientist, you are doing research, you are responsible for the planting. Why? Because sometimes they are going to mess up their seeds. At that point, your whole experiment will be destroyed. So next generation of students, if you want to do that kind of the experiment for yourself, for some genetic experiment or any other related, if you are doing any experiment, you are the person who is responsible for each and every activity of the experiment. If you are missing any activity, it means you are doing something wrong with your experiment. You are not taking care about your research, right? Anyway, that's my suggestion, but you may follow it or not. It depends on you. So this is the maize and the field experiment. There is 3 emerald lines only we have considered, and there are 55 mutant. Now here you could observe it. Their emerald line is very limited because we don't want to give the massive filling of the whole data set. We want to experiment only in the very narrow way, but we considered 55 mutant. And now I would like to give you the mutant filling. So once you will visit the cornfield, you will find the maize plant. On the leaf of the maize plant, there is brown spot. Once you will see the brown spot, their characteristics are different. When I say characteristics, what does it mean? It means their shape and size would be different. Some lesions would be along the axis. It means once you are considering the ellipse, and it is, since it's a different shape and size, you will not find perfect ellipse, but it could be like the one of the major axis or minor axis kind of the lesions. Once you will find circular, but at the center it would be lighter, and once you will go to the around the just increasing the radius of the center, radius of the circle, and you will find more brown, more brown, more brown. So these characteristics is very, very important. That makes those lesions different. And what we did image pre-processing, and thereafter image processing. We segmented those lesions, quantitated them, and thereafter we got 34 dimensions of the data. And even though we have on this research that there is another algorithm that we propose that is known as the DynaDAS, and that is a wonderful algorithm. I'll let you know in a moment. So that's the 55 mutants. So these, you could say there are 55 different types of lesions we collected from the cornfield through the images. That is the meaning actually. We never treated our plant with any growth condition. It means any urea and water. So you could say organic farming. And the image of the leaf we took. And one more thing, once we segmented those lesions, single image consists of about 3,500 of lesions on single leaf. And now think about it. We have about 1,000 leaves each year, and we collecting it from the last 14 years. How big is the data set? You could understand it. So that we got through the image segmentation and quantization, and where we got the 10 to 15 dimensions for that we considered for the experiment. But total dimensions we considered that we found, that is the 34 dimensions. In order to make our like the convenient research data analytics project, that's why we considered only 10 to 15 dimensions only. But actual data set has 34 dimensions. Since it's a big data set, we have enough amount of data. It's a parametric in nature. So these are the two experiments that we considered. Now, in both experiments, we have same question. How to find group of similar phenotype? Same question. The way of collecting data was different, but our question was same. How to find group of similar phenotype? It means how to apply cluster analysis. And thereafter, once you found the node, it means the different cluster would be the node, then how to infer the network among themselves, and thereafter the group of genomic sequences. So this is the problem that we are addressing. And now we ask these questions. The question is, first goal is to improve the rate of crop productivity. That is the question. And thereafter experiment we did. I'm talking about the experiment about the greenhouse experiment, Dr. Ann's lab experiment. And that it is looks like a very biological names and very genetics name, but it's very simple. I'm just going to read it. A biotic stress growth condition response on distinct maize emerald lines means a biotic stress growth. It means while they treating those plants with the nitrogen and water mixture, how the different emerald lines, it means their genetic background, responding. It means how their height is growing, how their canopy spread is growing, how their stem diameter is growing. That is the meaning of this terminology. So don't, particularly for the engineering background students, don't indulge with this technical terminology, because for the biologist, geneticist, it's very simple. But for us, particularly for me, it looks like very big. But once I understand this whole terminology, then looks like, hey, it's very easy, right? And these are the two objectives we are gonna address. Find group of similar phenotype, that is the clustering. And second one, find the optimal growth condition for the 90 emerald lines. It means while we treated those plants with the nitrogen and water mixture, which one is the optimal? I'm not saying minimum, I'm not saying maximum, I'm saying optimal, right? And once you say optimal, here you can't apply optimization algorithm. That is the data nature. I'll give you that flavor also. So this is the project has been funded with the NSF and USDA and NIFA. And we are really thankful about that for this funding. And this is the maize phenotype that we talked a ton. So now I'm gonna just speed up because I don't want to bore you, right? So phenotype is observable and measurable traits. And I already explained you what do you mean by the trait. For example, so if you forget it, like assume my color, that is the phenotype. This experiment has 90 embedded lines and 3 pair of the phenotype, and those pair are the plant height, canopy spread, and stem diameter. We have 9 different growth conditions. It means the 9 different nitrogen and water mixture. It means 9 different urea and water mixture, right? And thereafter we found the growth condition for the 4 plant, except here I think I should explain with the figure. That's fine. So what they say, they have 9 different conditions, and for the 8 different conditions we planted 4 plant, and 1 condition we planted 8 plant. So 8 multiplied 4, that is the 32, and 1 condition 8 plant, it means the 40. So earlier I said each and every embedded line we planted 40 plant. Among the 40 plant, 4 plant for the 8 different nitrogen water condition, and 1 condition that we have taken, that is the 8 plant. And these numbers are very, very important in this research. That's why I'm emphasizing it. And thereafter, since many plants died during the experiment after the treatment of the nitrogen and water, or and sometimes it's shrunk, so we have the value, negative value, positive value, and the 0 value at that point. We also collected the raw data, and their units and scales are different. Why? Because once you're talking about the height of the plant, that would you measure in the meter. Once you're talking about the canopy spread, might be in the some meter, but the stem diameter, it would be in the inches or centimeter. So their dimensions are different. So while you are going to analyze the data, you'll have to take care about that one. And these are the 9 different treatment we have. T for the treatment. Treatment 1, treatment 2, treatment 3, treatment 4. And we are not just randomly took this combination. It has been designed by geneticists. They have their about long years of experience. And geneticists are such a wonderful person. They just observe the mechanism and they could say this is like this. They have such kind of the experience, and I really appreciate their effort. So these are the 9 treatments you have, and here T1 to T9 everything is 4 plant. Only T5 we have 8 plant, right? So 8 multiplied 4, 32 plus 8, that is 40 plant. On the y-axis we have ammonia, that is the nitrogen water mixtures, I could say, and this is the water, and these are the particular unit. I don't know the actual unit because I never been involved in experiment. It is the data set that came from the Dr. Ann lab, so her students was involved in that, right? So I just got the data set and all these conditions. So I don't know whether it is in the milliliter or whether it is in the different unit. I don't know. Now come to the characteristics of the data set. Of course, it is a multi-dimensional data because at least we have 6 dimensions. One is the before plant height, and before canopy spread, before stem diameter, and after plant height, after canopy spread, and after stem diameter. So that we have multi-dimensional data. We also measured the root weight, but in this experiment, we have not considered it. Values are missing, and the data is sparse. And why? Because I said these treatments were treated with the all different embedded lines. Under the few treatment, plant growth was same, even though their embedded line was same. Suppose I say, forgive me, that is the embedded line names B73, that is the MO32. And so at that point, suppose B73 is good with the under the T9 conditions. This is the treatment condition. But it was not good under the T5. For examples, I'm not just saying the actual data set. This is just example. So it is the matter of concern. Few treatment was good for the few embedded land and few treatment was not. And that's the reason few plant die under this treatment, but all plant was healthy under this treatment. That is the good question, right? So that's the multidimensional, and that makes the missing value. Why? Because we don't have after plant height, after canopy spread, after stem diameter, because few embedded lines died under some condition, not under all condition. Point to be noted. Some condition, not all condition. That's why the make data sparse. And for example, for sparse means, suppose you have planted 4 plants. 2 plants survived, 2 plants died. In this condition, 3 plants survived, 1 plant died. In few embedded land, not all embedded land. Here, all 4 plants survived. Here, all 8 plants survived in few embedded land. So in that way, the whole data set becomes the sparse data set. Somewhere you have negative value. And why it would be the negative? Because we collected the data from the same object. Our plant is same. So in data science, it is acceptable. Once you have 2 dimensions data and you collected those 2 dimensions from the same object, here in my case it is the same plant, then you could make a difference. There is no problem in that, and those difference value could be analyzed. So that is the data science philosophy. But the big challenge was cluster analysis. Since this data is so small, their sample size is so small, you can't consider their statistical parameter. So while I did the exploratory analysis and the statistical analysis, at the beginning, it looks weird. And that weirdness raised so many questions in mind. How we are going to treat this data set in order to find the group of similar phenotype. That is the problem that we had. So first question was, we can't apply parametric clustering methods. Like in normal clustering method, you have the density-based clustering algorithm, you have hierarchical clustering algorithm, you have partition-based clustering algorithm. They have ton of algorithm. Even I tried few, but morally it was wrong. Why? Because data sample was small. Once I'm gonna do that, that is just crime. We are doing just crime with the data. So that crime I don't want to do. So that was the first question. And we don't have any evidence. So there is a one philosophy, that is imputation of data. According to my philosophy, if you are a data scientist, never ever do imputation process, particularly in the genetics experiment, because you are just making the whole data set dirty. Don't do that, please. The result will be different. Geneticist will be not happy, right? So we can't apply imputation process. Few people do, but I don't like it. And we need non-parametric clustering analysis. Why? Because data sample is very small. It is not a sample even greater than 30 number of samples. We have 2 sample, 3 sample, 4 sample, 6 sample. At that point, how you could apply those traditional parametric clustering algorithms? No, you can do that, right? So these were the challenges we had before finding the group of similar phenotype for the geneticist or agronomist, but for us, it is a cluster analysis. And so we start proceeding on this one. We start taking care of this data set. And first of all, we said, go ahead with the paired data. And why we got the paired data? Because we collected the plant height, canopy spread, and stem diameter through the same data set. So there is no problem in finding the difference, and that would be the good parameter. And second benefit, we reduce the dimension from 6 to 3. So that's another benefit. We reduce the dimension from 6 to 3. And now we have difference in height, difference in canopy spread, and difference in the stem diameter. So now here I would like to point out, do you remember earlier I told you, I'll let you know what is delta H, what is delta C, and what is delta S. This is the reason, because we considered the paired data. Then we thought, once you are considering the difference in height, their units are different. So their data range is different. Once you are going to compare those data points value, it means it is a comparison similar to apples and oranges. We can do that. If we are going to do that, we are doing crime. We are not doing the right thing. So we do need rescaling. and the data must be scaled into the same range. And there are many methods of the rescaling. Here also, my point of thinking is we adopted linear transformation or linear scaling rescaling system or min max rescaling system. Why? Because I don't want to alter the behavior of the data. And I have checked it. Once I plotted surface plot of raw data set, and thereafter rescale, once we rescaled this, and the same data rescale data set, we plotted their surface plot. Both surface was same, only their range was different. One was on this height, another one there, but their surface was same. They were going in the same direction in the surface plot. So we proved it. We are not going to tease with the data set, and we are not going to do any crime scale this data set. So that's very scaled between 0 and 1 just to reduce the time complexity of the analysis process. That's the reason. And thereafter, here we made their scaling between the 0 and 1. All data samples, canopy spread, height, and stem diameter data is in the between 0 and 1. Next point is standardization. Once you are going to apply any clustering methods, you will have to make their variance equal. In that way, data points will be allocated to the right cluster in a nice manner, in a comfortable way. And your data point will not feel stress. It is the feeling. Once you will start talking with the data, you will get that feeling in that plot. And I'll show you that feeling over here also. Probably I'll just show you one or two diagrams, not all, by running those algorithms. So that's the standardization. This standardization was the problem. We ran through many standardization. There are 17 existing standardization methods. And what was happening while we applied this standardization method, all data points was lumped together at the one point, or we were getting either the number of cluster hundreds, more than hundreds, more than 50. And these number of clusters was not making any sense to geneticists, because geneticists had feeling while they were walking into a greenhouse and while they are walking into the cornfield, they have feeling this group of similar phenotype is only 5 category or 6 category or 3 category. So geneticists, they have their practical experience. So they have feeling toward the plant and they knew it in advance. So once, as being the data scientist, I would say, hey, professor, this is the number of cluster, 100 number of cluster. And he said, it doesn't make sense to me. This 100 clusters, I never found in my cornfield, right? So that was the questions. And so I tried all 17 methods and I was not able to find the right solution. And then I thought, where are we are gonna do, where we are doing mistake. Then we thought about this equation. And once we analyze this equation, that this is a generalized equation I wrote for the all 18 methods combined. Those, this is the shifting, convolutional shifting process. These two alpha and beta are constants. And this is the actual data points. This is the standardized data points. And this is the gamma is the statistical parameters. So they do have the mean value, median value, and whatever. There are so many. I'll give you the list. Don't worry about it. So these methods we thought, and then I thought, hey, see, these are the statistical parameters. We are shifting, convolutional shifting, that also involves the statistical parameters. So once we are saying our data sample is small, or other side, we are applying statistical parameters. Is it good? And now think about it. You have only 2 data samples because you planted 4 plants, 2 plants died. You have only 2. Is it good idea to calculate mean value from the 2 data sample? Is it the good idea to calculate a standard deviation from the 2 data samples, find their variance from the 2 data samples, a standard error from the 2 data samples? No, no way, we can't do that. If we are going to do that, it is not the right problem, and we are not following the right procedure. So that's, I thought that we are doing mistake. That's why we are not able to find the right number of the clusters. So here, these are the analysis that we got. I just listed on only one parameter, gamma parameters, but similarly we have on the other parameters also. Like they considered Euclidean distance. How we could measure the distance once we have only two data samples in a particular experiment, and thereafter you are going to compare only 2 distances. No, statistically it is wrong, right? Whenever you have negative value, and that's the identification of the optimal growth is very difficult, because negative value you will have the different range of the data. So your analysis will be different on those data sets. Once you're talking about the distribution, you don't have any data distribution. Why? Because your data sample is small. Data sample is very sparse. So these are the questions we got over here. And we struggled a lot about a few months. And this is the experiment done by myself. So I struggled a lot, I could say. So this small data sample size gave me a ton of problems, and we were thinking about it. Thereafter, I start talking with the data. We plotted them, we observed them, and then we just observed according to all 90 embedded lines plot, and we understand the behavior of the data, how this data is shifting into the different dimensions. Since it was just only 3 dimensions, so I was lucky, I was able to see their 3-dimensional plot in space and start observing those data points. Then I came up with the one idea, and that's the idea. I proposed the novel standardization methods, and I call it the SDFS. This is the 18th new standardization method, but it is for the non-parametric analysis. Please don't apply on parametric analysis methods wherever you have enough number of data samples. When you have a small number of data samples, at that point you could apply it. This is the method I proposed, and that's in this method I got many benefits. All outlier was removed automatically. Initially I haven't observed, and one point I found, since this data was collected manually, one plant height was 100 meter, and that was outliers, of course. But as in the data scientist, I can't remove it. Though I talked to the geneticist and she said, yes, it is wrong, but I don't want to make it zero. I don't want to make it null, because we are going to lose that data point. Then I thought, let's try with outliers how we could handle this problem. And fortunately, I was able to succeed with this standardization method. If your data samples has outlier, that will automatically be removed by standardization method. Is one of the wonderful achievement of this algorithm, right? So this is the formula that we proposed for the data sample for the standardization. And thereafter, we observed the data samples like the distribution. So I plotted simply histogram, and through those histogram, this is the histogram, this is delta H, it means the difference in height, difference in canopy spread, difference in stem diameter. So similarly, this is the raw data set, original data set. And through this big line, it means it looks like all zero value. So it shows height, canopy spread, and stem diameter. Really, these values are a sparse data set. This data set is a sparse data set because ton of zeros are there. It also shows negative value. It means our data sample we do have negative samples also, negative data points also. It also shows different ranges. Their ranges -20 to about 80. Here is the -100 to about 60. It is -0.5 to 1.5, because this is the raw data set. So when I claimed the values are negative, values are positive, values are ton of zeros, and their ranges are different, and that's clearly visible in this histogram. Thereafter, we applied all 18 methods, including my method, that is the SDFS is here. Here I showed only 3 plots because these 3 methods are they were competing to each other. The results were very near to each other. That's why I considered only 3. And you could say other way, among the 18 methods, few group lies among this group, mid-range group outcome, few groups lies between the ABWI group, and few group lies into the SDFS group. So that's why just I picked one plot from each group and represented the whole experimental, because 18 plots, it's very hard to explain, right? Now, thereafter, we applied mode clustering algorithm. It is a non-parametric clustering algorithm. And why I considered this clustering algorithm, there is a reason. It is a kind of the density, but the way they calculate the density, it is really marvelous. They say, suppose you have seed point and you are going to consider one R radius sphere, not circle, a sphere, and within the sphere, count the number of data points upon divided by, it means divided by total data number of data points upon the volume of the sphere. What would be the value? That will give you the xi value, right? And that will give you the density, current, like the data density value. And in this algorithm, mod plus algorithm, still there was one question. Here I can't apply optimization methods in order to find the R and theta value, that is the threshold value, total number of data point inside the sphere. I can't find it, and I can't apply optimization method because my data sample is very small, very sparse. I can't apply. It has 2 value, 3 value, 4 value. How I could apply the optimization method? Then we applied the heuristic method. And what we did, we vary the value of R, we vary the value of the theta, and we observed the number of clusters. And then we have plotted over here. So this plot is one of the wonderful plot, I would say. And now I would like to say why it is the wonderful plot. Because here I measured on the y-axis radius of the sphere and density threshold on the x-axis, and the clustered classified point. It means all data points by some algorithm is allocated to some cluster. In few clustering methods, some data points was not allocated when you are going to change density threshold and the radius value on mode class 1. So at that point, we counted the number of classified points. Once it is 100%, it means the bigger dot size is big. It means that we are looking for, that we are interested in. We need 100% classification, 100% data allocation to each and every cluster, right? Thereafter, the number of clusters. The purple color shows their number of cluster is about between 1 to 10. Once you are going to red side, it means it is more than 100 clusters. So my concern is, according to the geneticist experiment, it is not my conception. Geneticist experiment, they observed in greenhouse, they do have 6 or 7 clusters, but they don't know how those are clustered because it's a 3600 of the plant, right? So ultimately we found we are looking for density value or threshold value or the radius value. I do have time. I'm right, Smith?
Yes, sir.
I do have. Yeah, go ahead. So within 15 or 20 minutes, I'll finish it. So this is the, we are looking for, this is the purple in color that we have the limited number of the cluster among the 10, and the bigger dot, it means the 100% classification. So you could say bigger dot, and that dot value lies from here to here. So you could say from 2.5 radius value, and you could go up to 4.5, or you could say 4. Yep, you could say 4.5, 0.45. That is the threshold value we got for the density threshold and the radius threshold. That is through this plot. Though I have calculated all the number of clusters, right? So it has been experimented on each and every data points. So that we got the R value and the theta value, right? I got one chat message somewhere. Oh, okay, I can't open it anyway. So thereafter we applied the mode cluster algorithms, and earlier I told you I just took 3 algorithms outcome. Why? Because those algorithm outcome either belongs to the ABW group, or the mid-range group, or the SDFS group. So among these outcomes, now you could say it has more than 100, and though I'll give you the data table where you have all algorithms outcome and the number of clusters and how many data points has been classified or unclassified. So this is the mid-range value, and this color of the data point shows the cluster, number of cluster. And you will find here more than 100 number of cluster because you have more than 100 different colors. Here in ABW, you found the cluster in the different 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, but they are lumped together. They overlap together. You can't see those data points. Though we are looking for the natural cluster. Natural cluster, it means those data points must be overlapped together. It means the cluster is, so It is the natural cluster, it means their arbitrary shape and size, and they must be overlapping to each other. That is the beauty of the natural cluster. But in SDFS, we got wonderful outcomes. See, all those data points are originally, as we saw in the three-dimensional of the raw data set, those data points looks very separated. They few clusters like the red color are overlapped with the green color. Blue color will overlap with the red color. Pink color and green color is little bit overlapping. The yellow color, you could say mustard color is also light bit overlapping, and they have arbitrary shape and size. And one geneticist saw it and they said, hey, it is the right cluster that we saw in our experiment also. So it was convincing and it was accepted by the geneticist. And these are the different 18 methods we applied. These are the different number of clusters, and these are the unclassified points. I compared in a plot, I showed you the plots, that is the SDFS, this one, 6 number of cluster, ABW 19 number of clusters, though the unclassified point was 0. Mid range was 100 of cluster, and the 59 data points are unclustered, right? So this is the good comparison. You could compare it, and SDFS is a superior one, right? And thereafter, we tested on the raw data set actually this outcome. Then we thought, why not we are going to go through the synthetic data set, because once you are going to propose any methods, you will have to prove them how it react on the synthetic data set apart from the real data points. So this is the synthetic data set that I created in a Python, and thankful to the NumPy. That synthetic data set, we took the different size because I was also able to prove how scalable is this method. So we have 3,000 of the data points, and thereafter the 6,000 of the data points, 7,000 of the data point, and 10,000 of the data point. And their distribution is sparse. It looks like a ton of zero. And their distribution is about to uniform, not exactly uniform, about to uniform. We kept it. And we want to apply our proposed method on this synthetic data set, and we try to figure it out how our algorithm is robust. So we applied the same method, it means the rescaling, standardization, and the clustering methods, and took the R and theta value in corresponding value, and we found this one. In here, 3,000 sample, you could see there are two clusters. One is in the black color. So data point color shows the cluster number. One is in the black point, and most of the data point is in the red. And they are natural, it means overlapping to each other and arbitrary shape and size. But the question was, most of the data points are located to the one cluster only. It's not good. That we are not expecting in our methods, right? We'll come to the 6,000 data points. Here we found 5 clusters, and all those data points are so nicely arranged into cluster. Those clusters are arbitrary shape and size. They are also overlapping to each other. It's a perfect natural cluster. Similarly for the 7,000 also. But in 10,000, it is not. So we conclude from this one, once you are gonna apply this method on the data sample less than 3,000 and about to 3,000, or sorry, greater than 10,000, at that point, this method would not be applicable. Why? Because it is for the non-parametric method. Once your data sample would be in like the 3,500 or 3,600 data samples and lies up to the 7,000 or 8,000 of the data samples, it would be applicable. So that's the finding we had on the synthetic data set. And this is we wrote one algorithm to find the optimal growth condition. And what does it mean by it? Here it's all emerald lines. There was 90 emerald lines like the MO23. They were overlapped to each other. So I removed those names, emerald line names, and I just put their trick value only. This is the 90 lines. And these are the treatment, 9 treatment we have. Treatment, I mean the nitrogen and water mixture treatment we had. And now you say, suppose this is the MO16, Missouri 16. They call it the emerald lines. That was found in the Missouri. Missouri 16, at that point you will say, once you are gonna see this color difference in height, this you could say greenish color difference in canopy spread, and pink color is different in canopy stem diameter. Sorry. So this is height, canopy spread, and this is the stem diameter. So it says once you are talking about the single emerald line, treatment 9 is good for the stem diameter, though this green color, treatment 5 is good for the canopy spread. And once you are going to go top, I don't have any data point value for that emerald line for the stem diameter because plant died, right? Similarly, you could analyze. Treatment 4 is, suppose you say B73. B73 is good for the, this is the height. So while you are treating maize plant with the nitrogen and water mixture, if you want yield, it is not necessary you will have to give equal amount of nitrogen and water. You should be very precautious. What is the right amount of nitrogen and water? It means the water and urea mixture is required. That is good for yield also. It is just a, you could say, byproduct of this whole experiment. That's why this says abiotic stresses how your plant behave with the different treatment. So this is the finding. We have all the 90 emerald lines, and we got the different treatment and their different condition. Which condition is suitable for what emerald, what phenotype? So those are the experiment that we're talking about, and these are the limitations of this experiment. That is the good for the low dimensional phenotype. Now everybody understand phenotype. I'm thankful to everyone, and useful to the sparse and small data set. And this method could be extended. I'm working on the multivariate one, but it is in the side box, not in the active research. But I hope one day I'll work on this one. And this is the field experiment that we have proposed. This algorithm, Dynadas algorithm. Beauty of this algorithm, I haven't used any metric space because high dimensional data is in non-metric space. There are so many subspaces you will find, and this algorithm has been proposed in the non-metric space, and I have tested about 512 GB data set. Still it is under the testing, and I tested up to 15 or 16 different dimensions. It works very perfectly, but still under it is in the active testing procedure. And the great beauty of it is non-metric space. It means I haven't used any distance metric in this algorithm. That is the greatness of this algorithm. These are the summary SDFS methods, and it get rid of all outliers automatically. It is non-parametric methods. They find cluster, that is the natural clusters, and this outcome would be very useful, would be useful for farmers, geneticists, agronomists, and plant scientists. And of course, we are looking for the more food product. That's the reason. I would love to take questions. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one question.
Yeah.
That is by one of the attendees. Any significant experiment going on in the field of food security right now?
Yes, ton of experiment, not only one experiment. So like in the food security, we are talking, I am the phenotype guy, so I don't have knowledge of everything, but in the phenotype, we planted corn in the field, we collecting the images, and those images are lesions of maize plant. And similarly, people are doing in the soybean. Similarly, plant scientist favorite plant is Arabidopsis. Yeah, that is the right term. Arabidopsis. They are started doing that experiment. They are doing this for the phenotypes also, and they are also doing with the plant scientist has more big domain. I just walked on those those experiments. That's why I explained you. But there are so many answers for this. Yep.
Thank you so much,
sir.
sir. Yeah, that was the only question. Maybe students are still to get absorbed in the topic, which you have intensely said. And we are joined by Dean School of Science, Dr. Bharti Dave, who is eminent microbiologist also. So over to Bharti madam for our reflections.
Yeah, very good morning, sir. I listened to your almost 3/4 of your lecture. Initial this thing, 5 to 10 minutes I could not attend. Sir, I had one question, one doubt. Regarding this thing, when I was an active researcher 3 to 4 years back, we used to use, and we are still using, my students are still using artificial neural network for determining the optimal conditions for any of the product, you can say, which can be of industrial importance. It can be enzyme or it can be any product. So can this SDFS be used for such type of analysis where we determine the best treatment condition, which would give us the best product? Or is it used only for this in plant studies?
No, this algorithm is for the data science, though I have implemented onto the plant science data. So this standardization method is open to applicable everyone. But here condition is your data must have the characteristics. First characteristics is your data must be the sparse, data sample must be the small, and if your data set satisfy these two conditions, then they must not have any statistical distribution. At that point you could apply.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also proved
So
the data
while
sample.
we were working on,
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
yeah. So while we were working on this thing, artificial neural network, it was hell of a job. We had to rush to mathematicians, we had to rush to computer scientists, and it was they who solved how to, analyze our results and how to set the experiments. But now I think with all these lectures on computer sciences that are going on, I think now there should be a collaborative effort where, a multidisciplinary approach where we involve mathematicians, computer scientists, and life sciences together. Yeah.
Yep, that's
Nice.
wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And time came back again. People are saying deep learning in computer science, but for the data science also. But most of the algorithm is just neural network based algorithm. So time came back again from the 60 to now to the 2021, and even from the last 5 to 6 years, people are working on it. So again, the neural network is active. Even my melanoma. So my melanoma cancer research, totally dependent on the deep learning algorithm.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Nice,
it's
nice.
science. It's coming and going. So now it came in the same thing, but in the different flavor.
Now, hearing to the last 2 or 3 lectures, now I very much feel this statistical methods or AI should be included in life sciences too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Thank you for your question, Dr.
Thank you.
Dave.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you,
sir, accolades are popping up that it was a very interesting and informative webinar. And congratulations are given to Dr. Sumit and Neha. Now I quickly invite Dr. Neha for the concluding remarks.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. So it's a great pleasure for me to give concluding remark today, as today's speaker is my mentor. He's my teacher. I know him from last 10 years. So I'm feeling very happy as well as nervous also by speaking in front of him.
We are colleague. Don't worry about it.
So I would like to give my sincere thanks and appreciation to Vats sir for sharing us with his knowledge, his views on the topic, which is based on role of data science for food security. And it under our webinar series, which is based on recent advances in the field of computer science and engineering under Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is sponsored by Gujcost. Also, I would like to thank sir for giving his details about his research project, what he's doing or what he has done so far in his research project, that is maize phenotype, which is using data science with some non-parametric things. Also, he told us about skin phenotype, which is a type of skin cancer. He's working on that. And about ecology, which is based on behavior of birds. Other than that, he has explained about the problem like how population growth is outracing agriculture productivity, and about the requirement rate of TFP growth and current rate of TFP growth in the field of agriculture. Also, he talked about approaches like complex phenotypes and their interdependence, about low dimensional phenotypes and high dimensional phenotypes. Sir also explained about how we can infer networks using some bottom-up approach or top-down approach we can use for that. Also, he discussed about issues which we are facing, like major issues which we are facing in these phenotypes. And in the end, sir showed us about his experimental data set in a very detailed manner, what he has done in his experiment by comparing the result with 2 labs also. And also in the end result also, he has explained very well, like what is the result with what he has done so far. So again, thank you so much, sir, for this explanation. You have given so wonderfully everything. So thank you. Also, I would like to thank all the participants for their active participation in this webinar series. Hope you have enjoyed this webinar series and you have gained knowledge which you can use for your future endeavor. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neha. It's time now for Dr. Sumit Chaudhary to have his views before we have the vote of thanks proposed by one of our students.
First of all, sir, I want to say I'm not nervous, even I'm fortunate to listen you. Really, it was wonderful session. You explained it very nicely. And, you have, includes results and approaches in the same field, what you have explained. And the same manner, our participant also fortunate to listen you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting our request. And in future also, I'll connect with you, and whenever time permit, I'll invite you once again for delivering lectures here. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you also, and it's my pleasure, and you're always most welcome. There's no need to say anything. It would be my pleasure. Yeah.
It is imperative and courtesy to propose vote of thanks to all those who were directly, indirectly involved in this webinar series, and over to Manthan for tendering vote of thanks. Manthan, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So on behalf of Indrashil University, I, Manthan Patel, take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks to those who have directly or indirectly contributed to this webinar. I thank you, today's speaker, Professor Dr. Abhimanyu Vatsa, for providing knowledge on role of data science for food. We are really enlightened with your words, sir, and knowledge you presented in today's webinar. We are thankful to our sir for taking time. We are thankful to you, sir, for taking your time from your busy schedule and enlightening us towards the words you have spoken in this seminar, and enlightened us towards the knowledge which you have provided, which is immense. A special thanks to the organization committee for their support and coordination. Our heartfelt thanks to our students present here for paying attention and taking widely part in such a beautiful event. Thank you, all of you, sir.
Thank you. Manthan, your name is very beautiful name. Manthan. We are doing every day.
Thank you, sir. But sir,
yeah, brainstorming. Yeah.
Yours is more complex than mine.
No, everybody is complex, man. Don't tell me.
Thank you, Dr. Abhimanyu. You, I mean, deserve a special appreciation, sir, because it's 12 midnight there and still you are spirited. And for us, you have been so passionately explaining the entire thing. So it's really commendable, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day and good weekend. And good night. Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night, sir.
Thank you.
Good night.